This is the Coaching Leader Podcast, a podcast about coaching, leadership, and leading through coaching. And here's your host, Scott Gress.
So welcome to the Coaching Leader Podcast, and today we're pleased to welcome Dr. Jonathan Grenz. He is the Dean of the School of Ministry and Catherine T. MacArthur School of Leadership at Palm Beach Atlantic University, a school that I know a little bit about as I got a master's degree from there in leadership. And he is the co-author of Synergistic Collaborations, Pastoral, a collaborative model blending pastoral care and social work. He's been a pastor, a professor of leadership. He got his PhD from Biola University. And he is also the president of We Are Life, board of directors, a foundation making an impact in those in Colombia. And I imagine knowing a little bit about Colombia, refugees from Venezuela as well.
Yeah, that's a new emphasis over the last year or two.
So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about your journey and how leadership became such a prominent part of it.
Right. Well, my journey really began in the church and discovering that through my education, I got a great grounding in the Bible and theology and some basic ministry practices. But one of the things that I discovered was I was lacking in the area of leadership. And, leadership is that big term that we use that means a lot of different things.
Yeah.
But for me, it was, how do I help this? And I started in student youth ministry, was how do I help my students move in the direction and influence them in the direction that God desired for them? And recognize I couldn't do it alone. So I needed to empower others, and lead us towards that goal. And I realized I didn't have any foundation for that. I didn't have any leadership understanding. And so through the process of kind of doing a couple workshops and seminars, and then started reading, and then eventually I went back to school and realized that I needed to do more. And I did my PhD at Biola, and one of the areas of emphasis was in kind of educational leadership, and that's where I was really exposed to theories about leadership, and that got me rolling on reading more and discovering more, and began to see those principles lived out in my ministry as a pastor.
Yeah, so take us a little step further in what you mean by that. What do we mean by leadership, and how does that intersect with ministry that is God-pleasing, productive, accomplishing His purposes?
Yeah. So for me, we often use that term influence. Just it's leadership is influence, but I find that is a limited definition because it really gives no direction to it.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, in a ministry context, whether that's in a church or a nonprofit, Christian nonprofit organization, it's really understanding that we're there to lead a group of people towards God's given purposes for that group of people or that organization. So it requires us to have direction, and that's where the supernatural and believe the Holy Spirit comes in, is that we need to be in tune with the Spirit to give us that direction and understanding for that. So it still has the influence aspect to it. But I often think that we focus on leadership versus leader. So we use like the action leadership, and we don't focus in on the leader. And I think that's actually probably more important, that the leader is someone who has that, as J. Robert Clinton says, the God-given responsibility and the God-given capacity to influence that group of people.
Yeah.
And those are critical elements for me. And when I think about leadership and a leader, those two, God-given responsibility and God-given capacity, becomes very important.
So that's a really helpful difference right there. As I'm just kind of turning that over in my mind. So as you, especially as a professional certified coach, and you're thinking about, well, what can the leader really do? Well, it starts with him, and they starts with working on themselves. And
Mhm.
what kind of things have you been seeing in working with leaders as the maybe developmental gaps, and
Mhm.
what's common, and what needs to be uh, paid attention to?
Yeah. Well, I'm a how-to person. So, for me, my natural instinct is to go to skill development.
Hmm.
That that leadership development coaching is all about skill development. And I quickly discovered that that doesn't work. You can have someone that has great skills, and number one, what are they doing with those skills? Are they actually applying them? What's driving them,
Hmm.
motivating them?
Hmm.
Um, and um, and so all of a sudden the person themselves becomes the critical piece. And I think that's the gap in many cases is the development of the person, the leader within, in a sense, as some people would call it, or self leadership becomes the critical piece. And so as I coach or mentor people, I always like to start there and then move, especially when I work with that definition of a leader as someone with the God-given responsibility and God-given capacity, is helping them understand that in their own life and begin to live a more reflective life in nature.
Yeah, and help us with some maybe some concrete examples of I know that you
Mhm.
like to spend time, and it's important to in mentoring and equipping, especially emerging leaders. Uh, what are some concrete examples or
Mhm.
that you could share with us?
Yeah. So first off, I want to get them to begin to establish that reflective life, and that looks like for some, I work with them and I'll say, okay, start a journal. Uh,
Mm.
um, with our students at PBA, we expose them to a practice that some people have called like soul care reflection, and we encourage them just to find a random place. It might be by the beach, it might be wherever, and begin to just take a moment. Here's a question, reflect on it, and what is God prompting you to think about, to reflect on, to examine in your life in that. And that's an example. So we do that. Another example really is I'll use a concept that Sam Rima and Gary McIntosh use in an old book now called Overcoming the Dark Side of Leadership. And I really feel like this is a critical piece in the development of the person, is to become aware of what they call dark side elements in our life. And that maybe is a narcissism or a compulsive type of characteristic, or a paranoid thing. And what I find is that having them reflect and say, you know what, it's okay to admit that, hey, I have this tendency that I could be really a little bit narcissistic. And but you only discover that through reflection about action and thinking. And then once you discover it, then you can kind of begin to allow it to not control your leadership decisions.
Yeah, if you don't acknowledge what pushes your buttons, or
Mhm.
um, it has a negative effect on your leadership, then you're going to be kind of a slave to it moving forward. So it doesn't do any good to be in denial
Yeah.
or ignoring it. What a great practical bit of advice, journaling and reflection. And so that's also a part of your emphasis with mentoring others, then, I'm gathering.
Yeah. So I, like many people in the area of leadership, would be encouraging leaders, especially emerging leaders, to be in relationship with someone that speaks into their life, um, and not so much in a sense of content of skills, but of speaking into the life, the character of the person.
Mm-hmm.
So we even, for example, we require our students to have a mentor who has character conversations, we call them, with them. And it will give them a question or an article, and we'll use that as a springboard into conversation about character, just to get them in the practice of having that person in your life that can call out things sometimes that they might see.
That's wonderful. And then what would be sort of a next step after that to begin to explore being a better leader?
Yeah. So from that standpoint, it's really beginning to understand what your end goal is, and understand what what you're trying to accomplish. And so often what I find is I'm leading an organization or a church, and we have a goal, and as a group I'm trying to get the organization to that goal. And over the years I've realized I've maybe run over people. I've ignored or pushed aside people that didn't fit that goal. And so one of the things that really has helped me, I think, become a more biblical leader, definitely would be that I'm focused also on the individuals, and say, how do I help them become what God wants them to be? And now it's not just the organization or the church, but it's the people who in church are the church to become that. And if they become that, what would the fruit be? And then I think that's where we would get to the idea that we would be accomplishing the goals that the church, or the mission that the church has. And it's changed my thinking. And so that's what I would be my next step, is like, I can teach you all sorts of skills and conflict management, all those different things, developing vision and mission and values. But if I can teach you that the next thing that you need to do is begin to impact and grow your people towards what their purpose is, and their what God has for them, then you're going to be accomplishing the vision and all those different things.
Yeah, isn't that's almost a flip of what you would assume, that okay, we're going to really, as number one priority, focus on the task or the outcome, and okay, I guess people will be helped along the way. But what I hear you saying is I guess I've kind of been putting it with some of my clients as, the goal is not the goal. The real goal is you work with the people, and you'll accomplish the task in the end anyway. Right. Am I on the same tracking with you?
Yeah, because again, what happens when we don't do that? It's so easy. If my understanding of leadership is really that influencing towards God's purposes, and I'm so focused on the organization, I find for me I drift. There's a drift in, so easily, subtly we move from God's purposes to my purposes. And so if I can keep others in front of me and say, I'm here to serve them, it's so much easier to stay away from what my purposes are and really stick to that. And that's and then all of a sudden it frees me up, so I'm not becoming kind of authoritarian, autocratic leader necessarily, but that true servant leader is allowed to be free when I focus on the others.
Yeah, so that task kind of becomes the tool or the means by which people are developed.
Yeah. Which is a problem. I think sometimes in our churches we have a problem, that leadership problem, and and part of that is us. We're so focused on the organizational goal and not the people goal. And if we begin to work on making the people the focus and developing the people, then I do believe we can accomplish the organizational goal. It will be the fruit of the work.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, so, go ahead.
Yeah. So I would, that to me, people, going kind of putting my pastor leader hat on, I see that discipleship, the nurturing of those in their faith and their walk, intimacy with God, is lacking. It's not intentional enough. Why? Well, sometimes I believe we get distracted by the organizational goals, and so we're driven by how many people are attending, how many people have come to faith, what's the budget, all those different things. And it's really quick. It's easy to fall into that and not realize that really, if we were discipling people, our leadership problem wouldn't be we wouldn't have a leadership problem. Because leadership, to me, is a part of the discipleship, the nurturing of those followers of Christ.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing is something that I've also been thinking, that discipleship process is helped by people being in a context of ministry.
Mm-hmm.
That it gives them a reason to be in the Word and to attend worship and to be in community, because they see the need for that, because they also want to be a servant of God appropriately. So when they have that bit of responsibility, then it makes it more real for them to grow as a disciple.
Yeah.
Am I?
Yeah, there's a relationship as I begin to understand and experience God more in my life. It causes me to want to give of my life, and as I give of my life, I begin to discover more of who God is and the beauty of Him. And it's this, and it feeds that kind of relationship. And so when you say, okay, they're already in service, they're serving not because we have a need in our church, but they're serving because they love God and they're experiencing that community, as you mentioned, and they're serving out of that. And as they serve, they begin to understand a little bit more about who they are. And all of a sudden they say, I want to do more. I feel like God wants to use me to have expand my influence or my impact for Him. Oh, well, let me mentor you, or let's get you into a small group that looks at how do you grow as a leader. And all of a sudden, then now we have leadership development taking place. Intentional leadership development. I think it begins earlier, but intentionally now we're looking at those steps for them to really begin to become leaders of others.
And that's quite a wonderful antidote to that consumer attitude of a member of a church. What have you done for me lately? Or I didn't like that hymn kind of thing.
Yeah. Right.
What else can you say about? We're talking about the leader. Is there something else that's important in this regard as it relates to those leaders coming together as teams?
Yeah, so leaders coming together as a team. One of the things I found is that's the hothouse of continued growth as a leader.
Okay.
So we do accomplish a lot more as team, but I think one of the values that we often miss of teams is the impact it has on those team members in their own development. So I'm prone to this. Maybe your listeners are, or, you've seen this, is where we have leadership, we have a team meeting, and it's all about the task, and it's not about each other, because we're all very busy people, and we want to get together, we want to go, and we want to do, and I think we miss out on something very valuable in team, and that is, how do we grow together, and how does my relationship with you grow me and challenge me? And how does your relationship with me help you grow and challenge you to become a better leader, a more mature leader? Mm-hmm. And maybe that's a better word, mature leader versus better leader. It's just sure. You become more mature in that. And so that's character challenges, it's skill, sometimes it's knowledge, like challenging you on a concept. And you're like, oh, I never really thought about it that way. that's the value of the team so much, and yet we always look at the outward impact of the team. I think we need to also be looking at the inward impact of the team.
How can a team leader or even a team member help to facilitate that happening and being more intentional?
Yeah.
Any thoughts there?
Yeah. So for me, it is, you need a little bit more extended time. And it's utilizing those times together in a more effective way. So the beginning of those meetings should be the connecting time. It should be the relational time where we can laugh together. We pray together. Then we listen to each other's stories, and the stories are not just my life story, but my story of the week, story of what was a challenge for you this week, what was a celebration for you this week. All those different things that take place should happen in a team meeting. And then there's a lot of things that we can do outside a team meeting when it comes to information. So, and I've fallen into team meetings or information meetings. Well, that's a waste of our time sometimes. I think we miss out. So maybe the next step would be, okay, we can send information out, but maybe we need to deal with a topic of challenge. So I'll give you an example. Just working with a leadership team on cultural intelligence and raising a problem that really is an issue of our cultural awareness. Like, are we self-aware? Are we aware of our bias and all those different things? And allow us to talk about it. Are we accomplishing something? Yes, because hopefully at the end of it, we're different.
Yeah.
But the information sharing and the planning, we can create other spaces for that. But I think that it's critical for our teams to be having times like that where they're, challenging each other, but they're supporting each other along the way.
Right. Yeah. So that same theme that you talked about with dealing with the leader, I'm hearing can be expanded to dealing with the team, so that it's not just about the task, but it's also working with the team and helping to work through those relationships issues or assumptions or whatever else could be going on, and giving yourselves the permission to include that is what I'm hearing.
And it's, obviously the point person, the facilitator or leader of that team, their responsibility is to create that culture. How do I create a culture of vulnerability, of openness? Those types of things are so critical because, how we tend to be defensive more often than not, and so if we're going to challenge each other, it's like, whoa, hey, I'm going to get defensive, and because you're getting too close to me. And so we've got to create that environment, and it starts with us as the leaders of those teams to be vulnerable, to share. And so it's being okay to say, it's been a really tough week. I've faced some challenges, and I've found myself in an area I don't want to be in. So those types of things, and let critique happen to the leader. So if I don't lead a good meeting, someone needs to say, "John, that was a waste of my time." It's like, okay, so now, but I don't want to get defensive with that. I want to take that and go, okay, well, how can I improve, and what can we do differently?
Yeah. So that point person models that.
Yeah.
What a great reminder and a help. Often blind spots in our committee work or teamwork or really helpful. Anything else that you could say about leadership or developing leaders or nurturing leaders, especially in a ministry or a church environment?
Yeah. I would just say this is one of the areas that I see going into churches. I've done a lot of interim work or transitional pastor. I'm currently a transitional pastor at a church. And I just see a void of leadership. And often what happens is there's a group of leaders, at least positionally they're positional leaders at least, and they're looking behind them and there's no one behind them.
Yeah.
There's no one that they can pass the baton to. And that creates just a real fear in those leaders. And instead of them letting go, it makes them want to hold on even tighter
Wow.
to things. And so really it's us saying, okay, well, let's spend some intentional time in growing people as followers of Christ and as leaders. And if there's something that I can do at the when I look back over my years of ministry in the church, it's like, what am I most thankful for? What have I go, you know what, I feel good about that? It's always related to the leadership development.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
not, numbers. When I moved to teach at Palm Beach Atlantic University, I was a pastor before coming here. And I don't look back and go, oh, that church was great. We grew it from, 150 people to 300 people. It's like, I was able to leave to pursue what God wanted me to do, partly because we had spent a year and a half really developing new leaders, and those leaders were in place, serving faithfully in significant roles in the church. And that's what I was like, that's what I remember.
Yeah. Wow. And it's so true what you say. Leaders being afraid because they don't see anybody behind them coming up. So what does that look like to do that recruiting? Does that mean inviting people to Bible class, inviting people to sit in a meeting or to go on the task with them? Or can you give us some
So, I mean,
highlights there?
we're used to like small groups for Bible study or community. What
Mm-hmm.
our approach has been, we create a small group, an incubator basically of leadership. And we look for those that have been identified by others as those that have some potential. They don't have to be the ones that are all kind of already standing out, but it's someone that you see a glimmer of opportunity, like they've got something in there, and we want to see what that is.
Mm-hmm.
We want to see what comes out. And so I remember one gentleman in our church who was a mechanic, and we said, Ron, you need to come with us, join us in our group. We're going to be, growing together. We're going to be talking about what it means to be a leader, a leader for God. And he's like, no, that's not me. I mean, that's the guy who, I'm a mechanic. I've got, dirt under my fingers, grease under my fingers. It's those that wear the tie. And we're like, no, you need to join. Well, eventually he joined, and it still took him a few months to really get the idea that that's not what we mean by leader. The person, that the leader is one that you can be an influencer, as a mechanic under the car, as you work with your other mechanics and as you work with other people that come and ask you, the people that drop their car off and things like that. And it was amazing to see that, because by the end of our time together, he fully embraced this idea, and God opened up doors. It's not a sad thing. It was sad for us, but he ended up moving because he had a promotion at his job to be one of those guys that wears the tie and managing a shop. And he had to move, and we're like, oh, but we invested in you so much, and you're leaving, and we love you. But, he took that not just to his workplace, but to his new church that he attended, and started being a leader in that church as well. And that was a beautiful thing. But he wouldn't have been the one that you would have picked right off the bat. And he wouldn't have picked himself.
And isn't that funny? You bring it up, and it's so true. That what got in the way was an assumption about leadership that had to get somehow recalibrated in their brain.
Yeah. And yet when we read the Bible, look at all the leaders. They were shepherds and fishermen, and, I hold a cup, for the king, I just hold a cup, and I drink it and hopefully I don't die, type of thing. They were not anyone special until God got a hold of them. and they began to just surrender to God and let him do what he wanted to do through them. But so we preach that, but do we actually like live it out in our churches where we look and oftentimes I've found, it's in the lowly you find the greatest leaders.
Yeah. Who are you missing that you're just overlooking, but they have a capacity for responsibility
Yeah.
that maybe you have a bad assumption about what a leader
Right.
is, and you're
Exactly.
missing it.
Yeah. And so for in a transitional period, I often go back and say, okay, part of the transition is we're going to take a step back in all the things that we do, and let's focus in on some leadership development.
Mm.
So
Yeah. So what did you use the word incubator group? But can you say
yeah,
just another bit about what exactly that is?
yeah. So in that we will spend intensive time and a weekly time together, and I've done it, for 3 months, 4 months, all the way to a year
Mm-hmm.
together. And in that, we're going to be, number one, trying to dismantle maybe their understanding of leadership that might be wrong and rebuild it in understanding what biblical leadership really is and what it means to be a leader. We'll explore their life and how God has been at work in them already, and they might not have even seen it, but as God has woven things together, there could be some indicators of what that responsibility, that God-given responsibility, might be.
And then probably that becomes more clear or emerges where they can be, engaged more intentionally in what that
Yeah,
is.
yeah. And so we don't want to just throw them into any spot. We want to throw them into a spot where they have that they feel like they've got that calling or God-given responsibility
Mm-hmm.
To serve and to lead. And so we'll kind of spend that time on that, and then how do you then continue to foster the inward life of the leader, and then we begin to introduce kind of the skill and the relational skills and the organizational skills and all those different things in that. So
Beautiful. Yeah. What a great practical thing to come up with, that incubator group, just to concentrate on some folks for that short time. Well, I'd like to talk about We Are Life and your work there, but can you just say a few words about the book Synergistic Collaborations, what it is and who
yeah,
it's for?
yeah. So it's a book for pastors and church leaders who, as pastors, we're taught a little bit about pastoral care.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the disciplines that we can learn a lot from is social work. And so coming to PBA, I had a colleague who was a social worker and was teaching, and we began to talk, and we said, there's a lot that we can learn from each other. Social workers have very rigid guidelines, and that they cannot cross those lines in relationship with clients, and they refer to them as clients. And we have, our boundaries are very loose, but there's so much that we can learn from them, insights and how to walk through challenges that people have, so that we can help them be empowered to overcome. And so that the book is really about kind of a dialogue between a pastor and a social worker. And we start with we start with a case study. Each chapter has a case study, and then we look at it from that case study from a theological perspective. And then there's a dialogue between the social worker and the pastor to say, well, what do we do in this situation?
Mm-hmm.
So and that comes out of my experience as a pastor in Canada. I didn't have a social worker. I had a nurse. And we began to collaborate together. Some may be familiar with the parish nurse concept.
Sure.
But we began to work together in that. And then all of a sudden, I had another woman in our church who was a social worker. And both of them went through our leadership development. And they said, well, I have these gifts the capacity that God has given me in social work and nursing, but I want to use them for ministry and to help people, not in the field of social work or nursing, but in a ministry context. And so we said, okay, let's go. And so they came on staff part-time at our church, and we began to learn together and work together to accomplish both from a parish nurse and a social worker.
Well, it sounds like a great resource that, we talk about congregations becoming too inwardly focused and then they die, but this might be a help for them to become more externally focused and, get back on track with the mission of God.
Yeah. And again, empowering people who already have knowledge, skills, to share in the mission.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Beautiful. Well, tell us a little bit about the organization We Are Life and what you're learning from the folks in Colombia.
Yeah, so We Are Life is a foundation here in the U.S. where we are helping develop, raise funds and develop work in Colombia initially, and then our dream is to go more in Latin America. But we recognize that there's a great need in different countries in Latin America. How can we connect and learn together and serve together? And so that's what We Are Life is doing. One of the things I go down to Colombia quite often, and I love the people. And one of the things I learned so much, I've actually taken students down there not to serve, but to learn.
Mm.
One of the things I love about my brothers and sisters there is that every church that I work with, they all have a social ministry. And they call them a foundation, but it's a social ministry that is serving the needs of their communities. So they're out there, they're serving. And so right now, for example, because of the Venezuelan refugee challenges over the last couple of years,
sure,
they are really serving that group of people that are wandering around the country, not really having a place of belonging, and they're serving them. And so the church really sees these things go hand in hand, the gospel message, but the gospel in action going together. And they're very intentional about it. And they do things differently than we do. So we learn their social ministry funds the church instead of the church funding the social ministry, which is really a fascinating way of thinking about it.
And I would imagine that through them being engaged in people's lives and serving other people, that folks are coming to faith.
Oh yes, yeah. They're coming to faith, and it's exciting, so much so that the government is catching on and saying, "Hey, can you help us?" So God's expanding their influence.
That's awesome. Well, how could people learn more about We Are Life? Share a website or?
Yeah. So you can just Google We Are Life Foundation.
Okay.
And that's probably the best way to find us. And if you have a problem with that, please contact me. I'll give you my email address.
Please.
It's just Jonathan, Jonathan _ Grenz, Grenz as in zebra, at pba.edu. And I can connect you with We Are Life. We can talk about ministry and leadership. I've had opportunities and privileges of working in parachurch organizations and nonprofits, as well as the local church. And so I always, I'd rather be sitting down and with coffee, talking with someone about ministry and leadership than sitting behind a computer. So it's pretty easy to get a hold of me sometimes. And you say, "I'll buy you coffee," and sure, let's go.
Well, thank you for making that offer so open for us and for our listeners and viewers. And thanks for sitting behind a computer for us today, too.
Well, this is fun, though. This is how we have to do it. We can't sit and have coffee right now necessarily because of COVID. But this is our alternative to that. But it's always fun to talk with people and talk about things that you're passionate about.
Yeah, the last time we met, we both had masks on, so now
Yeah.
I get to see you full faced. You know?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, thank you so much for offering the time and sharing your wisdom with us. We are very sincerely grateful for your generosity.
Thank you. Well, it's a privilege to be with you today, and God's blessing on you and your ministry, coaching people so that they are strengthened in their leadership. So thank you.
Okay, thanks
God
so
bless.
much. Thank you again, Dr. Jonathan Grenz, for being so generous with your time, not only on the podcast, but also in your office, and so generous with your wisdom today. Be sure to pick up his book, Synergistic Collaborations, Pastoral Care and Church Social Work, available on Amazon. And look into We Are Life Foundation, wearelife.foundation. Dr. Grenz may also be contacted at Jonathan_Grenz, GRENZ, at pba.edu. And we invite you to rate and review the podcast on iTunes and YouTube, and reach out to us if you'd like to collaborate on leader and team development. As a professional certified coach, we have some resources we can customize for your church, ministry, or organization. So God bless your leadership and leader development, and we'll see you next time on The Coaching Leader.